just to make sure we can get through all of the reproductive system, just a short little intro video on just some basics reproductive stuff. So again, as with most of my PowerPoints, we start off with some of the basic prefixes, root words, things like that you're going to see throughout this PowerPoint. A big one you're going to see is ander. Anything that has ander in it is male related. Genesis or gen means making, so you're going to see androgens. These are going to be things that make males or are male related. Ectomy, you're going to see a lot. Site, you see in a lot of things, but just a few you'll get through. We won't get through all of these in this little intro video. But looking through the reproductive system, basic parts of the reproductive system, you have primary sex organs and you have accessory reproductive organs. Your primary sex organs, also known as your gonads, are your testes in the males and ovaries in the females. And the reason why they're called primary sex organs is their main job is to make or produce your gametes. These are your sex cells. These are your sperm or your ova, the eggs. And I'm like, so it's making the sex cells, the gametes, and it's making some of the sex hormones. Androgens, those are the male hormones, and estrogen and progesterones in the females. So your main sex hormones and your sex cells, sperm or ova, are made in these primary sex organs, made in the testes, made in the ovaries. Everything else is an accessory reproductive organ. It's a duct for something to travel through. It's a gland that's going to make some other fluid that's going to aid in the reproductive process, and includes any external genitalia. The main goal of the reproductive system is to produce offspring. And so the male reproductive system is to make the sperm and deliver it into the female reproductive tract. The female's reproductive system main goal is to make eggs, the ova, and then nourish a developing fetus. Now, that in itself takes a lot of work, and so the female reproductive system is a little more complicated than the male reproductive system. A lot more hormones, a lot more things that could happen if a pregnancy does result. So we're going to start off with the male reproductive system, the simpler of the two systems, and we'll talk first about some parts of the reproductive system and finish them in lecture. But whether it's female or male, there are sex hormones, whether it's your testosterone, which is the big androgen, estrogen, progesterones. Those sex hormones play roles in development and function of your reproductive organs. They play a role in sexual behavior, sex drives. They play roles in growth, just your whole body growth and development of other organs and tissues. Now, starting with the male. So a lot of this is review different parts from lab, which is kind of nice. We just talk a little bit more about what's going on and what each of these different things does. So a lot of stuff labeled on there. We're just going to start, with the basics. We're going to start with the scrotum. We're going to start inside in the testes and then kind of work our way all the way through. Intro video, we won't get through all of it, but we're going to start here with the scrotum, which is going to be a sac of skin and some superficial fascia that's underneath that. The interesting part about the scrotum is that it does hang outside of the abdominal pelvic cavity. Your abdominal pelvic cavity is up here where you have all of your basic digestive organs. However, this is hanging outside of that. That in itself seems foolish that it's not protected as the rest of our organs are. But there's a reason for that, is that inside of there you have the testes, and the testes produce sperm, and they produce sperm at 3 degrees Celsius lower than core body temperature, or about 5 degrees Fahrenheit lower than your core body temperature. And so we don't want them to be housed inside that abdominal pelvic cavity, or it would actually be too warm for them. So they need a lower temperature for sperm production. That's why it's housed outside of that abdominal pelvic cavity. Because again, ultimate goal of the male reproductive system is to make sperm and deposit them into the female reproductive tract. Now, because it hangs outside the body, and because there's that temperature factor in there, there are two muscles that are found in and around the scrotum that help maintain the temperature. trying to maintain it as much as it can at 3 degrees below Celsius below body temperature. There's a dartos muscle. It's a smooth muscle, and it wrinkles the scrotal skin and it pulls the scrotum close to the body if it's cold out. Again, if it's cold, that would get the sperm temperature could maybe get, even colder than 5 degrees below body temperature, which is outside that optimal sperm production temperature. And so when it's cold out, it's going to bring that testes close to the body, and I'm like, to keep it warm. The cremaster muscle does the same thing, it just works a little bit different. It's made out of skeletal muscle, and the cremaster muscle elevates the testes also, that if it's cold, it's trying to bring it closer up into the body to try to keep it warm. Now, the opposite is if it's warm out, both of these muscles are going to relax so that the scrotum with the testes inside hangs farther away from the body. If the body temperature rises above that 98.6 degrees or 37 degrees Celsius, that again, it's going to be too warm for optimal sperm production. And so those muscles are going to relax to try to keep it as far away from that hot body temperature as possible. Again, ultimate goal, make sperm. Now, inside that scrotum, we have the testes. So we have the scrotal sac that hangs on the outside, but inside you have the testes, kind of looks like the big white egg in here. And inside the testes, it's divided into little septa, and inside the septa are, little lobules, and inside of each of those lobules we have these seminiferous tubules. It's these little yellow tubules that everyone says it looks like ramen, so sorry if you ever look at ramen the same again. But it's these seminiferous tubules that are inside of here, and it's in these tubules is where sperm is actually made. And so it's like, yes, the sperm is made in the testes. Well, it is, but it's made inside these seminiferous tubules inside the testes. Now, some of the cells that surround these tubules are known as myoid cells. And anything that has my in it means muscle. And so these are kind of muscle-ish cells. They're not made of muscle tissue, they're still a cell. But the cells that are around here can try to squeeze the sperm a little bit and try to get those sperm and any testicular fluids out of the testes. They're not the only thing that helps move them along, but they help. They're one of the things that can help move them along. Now, as the testes are made, they're going to travel, so they're made in the seminiferous tubule. All the seminiferous tubules are going to dump into kind of this orange structure known as the reedy testis. From there, it's going to go near the top of the testes, it's outside of the testes in the scrotal sac, known as your efferent ductules, E meaning exit, they've just left the testes. And then all of the efferent ductules are eventually going to dump into this one singular, bit long and windy, epididymis. And so it eventually makes its way into the epididymis. Now, I can't remember why I put this little factoid here. I was talking about it at some point through in there, but yes, sperm are viable for around 6 days in the female reproductive system. I'll talk about that later in lecture, how long eggs last and how long sperm last. Now, just looking microscopically at these seminiferous tubules, so here's the tube. Again, we took a cross-section of one of these seminiferous tubes, and this is where your sperm are getting made. I'd say this is more of that, it'd be early on. A lot of times you can actually see the flagella in lab. We had some of the pictures where you could see the flagella coming off of the sperm inside here. But around the seminiferous tubule, we have some of those myoid cells, those kind of muscle squeezing cells. But also, we have additional cells that are called interstitial cells. So these are cells found in between all of these seminiferous tubules. And the main job, highlight, star it, main job of these interstitial endocrine cells, anything endocrine means hormones, is that these interstitial cells are the cells that make androgens or male hormones. Biggest one is testosterone. And so it's these interstitial endocrine cells that make testosterone. So again, we said the testes' main job is to make sperm and to make hormones. And so it's inside the seminiferous tubules where sperm is made, and it's these interstitial endocrine cells where the hormones are made. Now, kind of got through where the sperm are made. And I'm like, before we follow the sperm along, and I'm like, we're going to talk about another male structure, the penis. It's part of your external genitalia. So the scrotum's part of your external genitalia. The penis is part of the external genitalia. Now, the penis is your male copulatory organ. It's the organs that its job is to get the sperm into the female reproductive tract. And it consists of various parts. It has a root and shaft that end in the expanded, thicker glans penis. It also has a prepuce or foreskin. It's a cuff of loose skin that covers the glans penis. And it's that prepuce or foreskin that's usually removed in circumcisions, which is a little bit more on my next slide. And part of the penis, it also has a muscle called the crura, and or crus for singular, but it's a muscle that anchors the penis to the pubic arch. Because again, it's a lot of muscle, there's a lot of tissue there, and it just has to have an additional muscle that anchors it to the pubic arch. Now, the removal of that foreskin or prepuce, known as circumcision, happens in about 60% of newborn boys in the United States, which is way above the normal percentage worldwide. It's only about 15% in other parts of the world. A lot of people claim it's medically unnecessary. However, there are some studies show that you have a reduced risk of other reproductive system infections. And I'm like, it kind of goes either way. If you like uncircumcised, you've got things to back it up. If you are for circumcision, there's things to back it up. Either way. Now, inside the penis, and I'm like, it has different types of it's got different types of tissue that can fill with blood. But one, you have the urethra, and you have what's known as the spongy or the penile urethra. It just means the urethra that goes through the penis. And you have 3 cylindrical bodies of erectile tissue. Now, this is a spongy type of tissue, and it's got various types of spaces, vascular spaces that can fill with blood during an erection. Now, because there's 3 cylindrical bodies, 2 are the same. You have a corpus spongiosum. It looks very much like a sponge-like tissue, and it's the tissue that surrounds the urethra, and it's also the tissue that expands to form that expanded glans penis at the end of the penis. You also have the corpora cavernosum. That's a paired erectile tissue bodies. Now, during an erection, all of that erectile tissue fills with blood, which causes the penis to enlarge and become rigid. Now, looking at the tissue, better picture. Now, there's your penile urethra, just the urethra that goes to the penis section. Surrounding the urethra, you have that corpus spongiosum. And again, everyone's like, oh, it looks like it's just this tiny little bit, and it really kind of is. You've got corpora cavernosum and you've got corpus spongiosum. Corpus spongiosum is by far the least. And I'm like, it just surrounds the urethra. So there's the urethra right there. It is not in the center of the penis. And surrounding it is the corpus spongiosum. They just put it in here so that you can see all of it together. The part that makes up, the tissue that makes up the majority of the penis is the corpora cavernosum, and you've got 2 paired bodies of this corpora cavernosum. I always think, based on its name, it's like little caverns. Like each one of these kind of has a little striped appearance. I always think of them as little mini caverns that can fill with blood. Now, ducts, again, are going to carry sperm from the testes out to the body exterior. So we looked inside of the testes, the seminiferous tubules, that reedy testis, the efferent tubules, down into the epididymis. So I'm like, we kind of ended right down here. Well, from the epididymis, it's going to travel upward through what's known as the ductus deferens, also known as the vas deferens. And then it will travel all the way through, still part of the ductus deferens, even though it, yes, has gotten larger. And then right here, right where it meets up with the seminal vesicle or the seminal gland, it's got one tiny little area. It looks very tiny in this picture, a little longer if you see it from a side view. You have the ejaculatory duct, and then from the ejaculatory duct, it goes right into the urethra. And so I'm like, and then eventually out through the body. Now, the epididymis, and I'm like, the part that's kind of right here surrounding the outside of the testes. The epididymis is about 6 meters in length. That's like 20 feet long. It's very windy, very twisty. Inside of there, there's lots of microvilli to absorb testicular fluid, as well as pass nutrients to stored sperm that are in there. So non-motile sperm, they're not always moving in motile right away, enter into the epididymis. They travel through that 20 feet, and I'm like, for about 20 days, and in that 20 days they become motile, and they can actually be stored in that epididymis for several months. During ejaculation, the epididymis contracts, expelling the sperm into the ductus or vas deferens. Now, the ductus deferens or the vas deferens, it's got two names. I don't care which you remember it as. I like vas because I think of vasectomy. But the vas deferens, which is about 45 centimeters or about 18 inches, and I'm like, joins where the seminal vesicle or seminal gland comes out, and it forms that ejaculatory duct. And the smooth muscle, they're surrounded by smooth muscle. It's then still just moving sperm along, propelling sperm along. Now, when they talk about vasectomies, ectomy means removal. And I'm like, vas is because it's talking about the vas deferens. They are just cutting that vas deferens, that ductus deferens. That's it. Now, I'm going to go back to my thing. They are cutting that vas or ductus deferens. Now, the only thing that's traveling through that ductus deferens, vas deferens, is sperm. Might have some nutrients in it, but that's it. 95% of all semen comes later, comes from all of these various glands. Really, the only thing in that vas deferens is just sperm. Now, a vasectomy is nearly 100% effective form of birth control. Again, you are blocking sperm. You are blocking that sperm from leaving the male reproductive tract. But there's always that 0.1% chance that the vas deferens can grow back together. It happened. There are cases of it. Now, the urethra conveys both urine and semen. And so semen is going to go through the urethra, but yes, the bladder that sits up there also dumps into the urethra. Luckily, it conveys them at different times, thank goodness. But there are three regions to the urethra. There's a prostatic urethra, the part of the urethra that goes to the prostate gland. There's a membranous urethra, also known as the intermediate part of the urethra, that goes through this tiny little tissue. It's called the urogenital diaphragm. This tissue, so just this tiny little section, is that membranous or intermediate part. And then you have the spongy or penile urethra. Called two things. I don't care which one. I'm like, this book likes to call it spongy. Other books call it the penile urethra. Again, it's the urethra that goes through the penis. It's also called spongy because it's surrounded by that the spongiosum tissue. Either way. Now, I'm going to start in lecture right here as we talk about the three big glands. They're accessory glands, and it's these three glands that produce the bulk of the semen. 95% of semen, again, comes from these accessory glands. That 5 additional % just comes in as the sperm itself from the testes.